going to start a new application in this set of videos. A lot of it will be review, but there'll be a couple new things thrown in here and there. Some of the stuff that I'm going to show you'll need for your upcoming project, and some of it will be things you'll need on the next project. So I'm going to start with basic activity, and I'm going to put this one actually out in our repo. I'm going to call it, what is it, are these recipes or, so there's this API I found with some beer stuff that we can use. So let me think, I'm going to call it, I should call it beer. There you go. Good a name as any. API 28 is fine, don't need that. Class demos, oh, yep. Sorry, just looking through, I'll put it in the folder beer. This one I'm not going to break up. Last one I did part 1 and part 2. This one I'm just going to go all the way through. Again, most of this is review. And of course that's way too big. So let's scale it down, get it on the screen. So on this video, before I worry about the actual functionality of it, I just want to get the app itself set up and working. And what I mean by that is just get the navigation, everything in place. Right now, as you know, when I first created, we get a nav controller, down here on the navigation, right? We get the nav graph. We also get a first fragment, second fragment, but that's not actually what we want. I don't want it to be called first fragment, second fragment. I want them to have meaning. And the first time that I did this through, I actually showed deleting those, adding new ones, adding them into the menu, adding them into the nav graph and all that. This time I'm going to do it a little bit different, just to again show you other ways of doing things. The first thing that I would always do is just run the app and make sure that nothing's out of whack. Should work just fine since it's just a generated code. Yeah, everything works great. Okay, so let's go start cleaning up some of the code. First thing I'll do is I'm going to rename these. I'm not interested in it being called first fragment, second fragment, so come up here, right click, and we'll say refactor, rename. And on this one, just by the way, I always get kind of messed up on this because when I start to type, it messes things up. You got to like hit your arrow and then move your arrow back. Now rename it. So I'm going to call this one list fragment because the first screen is just going to be a recycler view, a list of things. There we go. And while I'm on here, this does a button listener. We're not going to need that, so I'll go ahead and just delete it too. Oops. Okay, so I think everything else is fine. Of course, this comment is meaningless, but maybe I'll change that later. Okay, so we got renamed to list fragment, and now let's go to second fragment. This is going to be our detail. So again, I'll go refactor, rename. Move my mouse. There we go. I'll call it detail fragment. Perfect. Same thing. I think it's got, yeah, by default it has a button on here that we don't want. Now I'll go to the layout, and we'll take a look at both these. So the names are still first and second. So remember that the layout, this code file and this layout file, they're only associated because in the code file we inflate that layout. So I want the layout, they don't have to be the same. They can be completely, right, no relationship really. But it's easier to understand if I keep the names similar. So let's go down here and do some refactoring. So let's go to fragment first. I'm going to right click, refactor, rename, and I will call it fragment list. And then while I'm here, I'll go ahead and kill some of these UI controls we don't need. And then I'll go to fragment second. There it is. Right click, refactor, rename, fragment. I'll call it, again, fragment detail. A little bit generic, but that's okay. And then let's get rid of these other controls. So far, so good. The next thing, I want to fix our nav graph too. So in our nav graph, it's still got these names. It's got IDs that created my nav graph. Fragment first, fragment second. I don't need those, so let's go to first fragment. And let's change the ID from first fragment to list fragment. And yes, I want to refactor. Do the same thing over here on second fragment, change it to detail fragment. There we go, refactor. These two connectors, the one that goes from detail back to list, there used to be a button here that would go back. We actually don't need that one, so I'm going to get rid of it. The only nav we really need is, let's move these around so they're in a more sensible way, from the list to the detail. This name, the ID was generated. It's still got first fragment to second fragment, so I'm going to change it to action list to detail. There we go. And I think that's everything. So I'll go ahead and just do a real quick build and run. See if there's any issues. Okay, the build went clean. Let's do a run. And there we go, came up. Oh, still need to get rid of this. I'm not going to need this button for anything. I'm actually not going to need the menu either. But maybe I'll leave them there. I'm not planning on using either of these, but maybe I'll change my mind later. So I'll leave them for now, delete them in another video. But right there, I think I'm going to stop, actually, and then we'll start on the next video, starting to get our UI in place and wiring up our API calls.